Hey guys, this is Tearless here, coming at you from Beta Realms, taking a look at the major changes to Shadow Priest. Going to be looking also at their changed abilities, their new glyphs, their new Draenor perks, and their changed and new talents. Now, the major change, I guess the biggest change going to Shadow Priests, is going to be their mastery. Blizzard eliminated all the masteries that kind of dealt with multi-strike, their new multi-strike stat, so that affected Shadow Priests as it did Elemental Shamans and like Marksmanship Hunters. So they got their mastery changed. It is now Mastery Mental Anguish, which increases the damage of Mind Blast, Mind Spike, Mind Flay, and Mind Seer by 20%. Honestly, I really don't like this. I would like masteries to be something interesting, like maybe the first iteration of Shadow Priest Mastery that came out, dealing with orbs, or Arcane's Mastery, where you have to deal with the mana. I just wish Mastery was an interesting gameplay mechanic to the class as opposed to just a straight damage buff, but that is what Shadow Priest has received, so that is their mastery, their brand new mastery. Another change to Shadow Priests is the de-emphasis of mana. Mana is no longer important to any class that is a DPS mana user. They have just eliminated it from the game completely. They are slowly but surely making sure that every class that uses mana has a secondary resource. So Shadow Priests have their Shadow Orbs that they now have to manage. That becomes even more evident with one of the Draenor perks that comes. If you notice in the top left, I have 5 Shadow Orbs. So it's everyone's. I think there are only 3 specs in the game that don't have something to go along with mana as a secondary resource. So mana's been kind of removed from the game. I'm kind of disappointed. I liked having mana as a resource in the game, and it's not there anymore. So the inner buffs, so your inner fire, which you've had since forever, because it was a priest buff in Warcraft 3, and inner will, I think it is, those have both been removed from the game. They are no longer there, so it's just a self buff that you're no longer going to have to worry about. The 90 tier of Warlock talents, so everything right here no longer heals the target. It's just going to be straight up damage. So that's one thing that has been changed in the talent tree. The Shadow Priest lost a lot of, well, they didn't lose CC, but they lost some, but their CC diminishing returns have been consolidated. So they basically took a lot of CCs and they grouped them under one diminishing return umbrella, and the overall objective and goal of this is to reduce overall CC within Battlegrounds and make it a lot less, right now in Mists of Pandaria, there's CC happening everywhere. You can be chained completely. That's not going to happen anymore, because CCs have been brought under one diminishing return umbrella, and so they're going to, I guess you could say, they'll diminish a lot quicker. Haha. And it just overall, it'll be a benefit for the game in PvP. You're not going to notice it that much, I don't think, because it's happening to everyone. So just realize you're not the only one getting hit. Everyone's getting hit. The other change isn't going to show up in any patch notes for Shadow Priests or patch notes for like changed abilities, etc. And that is the buff to their mobility. Now, what Blizzard has done in Warlords of Draenor is they have nerfed and removed a lot of casting while moving. So Elemental Shamans lost their Lightning Bolt on the move. Killjaden's Cunning for Warlocks has been nerfed to the ground. A lot of mobility buffs for casting have just been removed or changed so that they're not as good anymore. So how does this affect Shadow Priests? Shadow Priests didn't really get any of those nerfs, but Shadow Priests were already like Arcane Mage's turrets. So everyone's being brought down to their level. Now that doesn't really give a mobility buff against casters, but it does give you a mobility buff against melee now, because melee is now having to be tuned to that lower tier, the tier that Shadow Priest has been sitting on, and Arcane Mages have been sitting on. Melee is now being tuned to that tier as opposed to the high mobility tier that we have in Mists of Pandaria. So indirectly, you're going to feel a mobility buff to the Shadow Priest class. That brings us into changed abilities for Shadow Priest. First is Devouring Plague now costs 3 orbs no matter up. And it's straight up just 100% healing per damage that is given to the ability for the damage that you do. You'll get 100% of it back in healing. So the reason for the Shadow Orb change is because, like I said earlier, you have 5 Shadow Orbs, and this is due to a perk up in the top left corner. So it's kind of like Paladins that will have, 5 different, holy power. You now have 5 Shadow Orbs. And so Devouring Plague will only consume up to 3, and it will cost 3 only. So you can't do it at 1, you can't do it at 2, it has to be 3. And you can see right here the 100% healing. You can see the similar numbers popping up between damage and healing. Nice little change there. Dispersion had its mana component removed. Since there's the de-emphasis of mana, there's no reason to have any mana regeneration abilities. So Dispersion is still in the game for its defensive effects, but its mana effects have been removed. Mind Blast now has a 9-second cooldown up from 8 seconds. Now, the reason why Blizzard did this is because they wanted to make haste a more valuable stat to Shadow Priests. And what they did is they made Mind Blast a 9-second cooldown, but they now allow haste to affect its cooldown and reduce its cooldown. So you can see right here in the bottom right corner, I have a 7.7 second cooldown on Mind Blast as opposed to a 9-second cooldown. So it is a nice, definitely a nice change that has been brought to the class. Oh, there's a bugged out Cataclysm proc. Let's see, the next one is Psychic Horror. Psychic Horror now can consume up to 3 Shadow Orbs, and it will increase based on how many Shadow Orbs you consume. So it can only go up to 3, but you can do it at 1, you can do it at 2, and it will just add on 3 seconds per Shadow Orb consumed. Shadow Form has had a little change in the fact that it no longer allows any healing spells to be cast. So you're no longer going to be able to cast Prayer, Mending, etc. on your priest while in Shadow Form. And we'll just find see, I pop out of Shadow Form immediately now. And I can't remember if it was a buff or whatnot that allowed you to do that before, but now you cannot. And you can still bubble though, I will say that. You can still bubble while in Shadow Form. But no longer any healing spells are allowed in Shadow Form. Vampiric Touch. Vampiric Touch, if dispelled, the Dispeller flees in horror for 3 seconds. I could have sworn this was in game. It was driving me nuts trying to figure out where it was changed from. Was it a passive? Finally, I had to talk to some more, I guess, well-versed Shadow Priest and found out that this is the same buff that's on your PvP set bonus. So it has now just been baked into the ability as a whole. Vampiric Touch now just has the dispelling mechanic in it, which is a nice buff to Shadow Priest. Shadow Fiend no longer generates mana, so that's one thing you should know. And Dominant Mind will now share, in accordance with the CC consolidation, diminishing return consolidation, Dominate Mind will now share diminishing returns with all other Mesmerize effects. Now, removed abilities, they lost Divine Focus, which was the damage pushback reduction when being attacked. They lost Hymn of Hope, which was a mana buff, so you don't need that anymore. I already mentioned Inner Fire and Inner Will. They're both gone. And then they also lost Void Shift. You can no longer swap health with a target. I'm not quite sure the reasoning behind that, but Blizzard has removed it from the game. Binding Heal is gone for Shadow Priest specifically. And then Spiritual Precision is gone. That's because that was a hit buff, and hit has been removed from the game. So, that moves us into the brand new glyphs of the Shadow Priest class. I'm going to take a look here. The first one is Glyph of Delayed Coalesce. I think I pronounced that right. That is, Dispersion lasts 3 seconds longer, but when it has 2 seconds remaining, its damage reduction reduces 30% per second. So, Not quite sure how popular that one will be. You'll notice it says exclusive with Glyph of Dispersion and Glyph of Free Action. That means that you can only have one of those three active at the same time. You cannot have all three or even two of them active at the same time. Another new glyph is Glyph of Free Action, which is while Dispersion is active, you move 30% faster. I kind of like this one, especially since Dispersion is a pure damage defensive cooldown now. So that's one of my more favored ones that's new. There is Glyph of Mind Harvest. This one is also really cool. The first time you damage an enemy with Mind Blast, you gain 2 additional Shadow Orbs. So, let's see that in practice here. See what it looks like. Go ahead and use Mind Blast. And it's not working on the training dummies at the moment, but still, that's a pretty cool glyph to have abilities to. Remember that it is exclusive with Glyph of Mind Blast, so you can only have one of the two. The next one is Glyph of Miraculous Dispelling, which reduces the mana cost of Mass Dispel by 50%. There is Glyph of Restored Faith, which Leap of Faith pulls you to your target instead of pulling your target to you. So that's a nice change. And then the last one here is Glyph of Silence. Reduces the cooldown on your silence spell by 25 seconds, but also reduces its duration by 2 seconds. I honestly like this one. Silence has a 45-second cooldown. And so many other classes got their silences nerfed to the ground and destroyed that I don't think it will be such a bad idea to grab this glyph. Because that 25 seconds off your cooldown is huge. So I think there will be some people seriously considering taking this with the new Shadow Priest in PvP. The new Draenor perks for Shadow Priests are actually not bad. They've got, I think, 3 just straight damage buffs, which are boring. But the rest of them aren't bad, so let's go ahead and take a look at them. They have Empowered Psychic Core. Your Psychic Core lasts an additional 2 seconds, and I'm assuming that means per orb. So instead of your first orb lasts 3 seconds, so I'm assuming you're using it with 1 orb, it lasts 3 seconds now. So it originally lasts 1 second, and then per shadow orb it went up to 3 seconds. Now it's 3 seconds and then up from there. So that's a nice little change. The next one is Enhanced Mind Flay. Your Mind Flay deals damage 33% faster. There is Enhanced Power Word Shield, reduces the duration of your weakened soul caused by Power Word Shield by 5 seconds. I can go ahead and use it right here. You can see, no longer 15 seconds, it's now 10 seconds. Enhanced Shadow Orbs. This is the big one that's really important, and that is you have a maximum of 5 Shadow Orbs. No spell or ability will consume more than 3 orbs, so you can pool up to 5, and then if you have that Mind Blast up, you can burst it, so I would say. Enhanced Shadow Word Death. Shadow Word Death now always generates a Shadow Orb, regardless of the cooldown reset. There is Improved Flash Heal, Mind Spike, Shadow Word Pain, and Vampiric Touch. Those are all just straight damage increases or healing increases in the case of Improved Flash Heal. So the bottom 4 are really lame, but the first 5 are pretty cool, and I like them. They're interesting changes to the class. So 50% isn't bad. Some specs are just awful, and they pretty much just got nothing but damage buffs. So not the best, but not the worst either. That leads us into the talents for Shadow Priest. First thing you should notice here is that the level 15 talent tier and the level 60 talent tier were switched. If I remember correctly, this is because this is more of a healing change instead of a shadow change, just to give healers more, I guess, utility at the early levels. That's what I remember it being. I'm not quite sure, but that is what I remember from my information gathering. So Angelic Feather, going up the list here, Angelic Feather has been reduced to 60% increased movement speed as opposed to 80% increased movement speed. There is Surge of Darkness, which now will affect Devouring Plague. It used to only be Vampiric Touch, well, now it affects Devouring Plague, and it can accumulate up to 3 charges as opposed to only 2. So that's a change with that one right there. If you notice on the 60 tier, it has Psychic Scream. This is correct. You have lost Psychic Scream as a baseline ability, and its cooldown has been increased by 15 seconds. This is a huge PvP nerf for Shadow Priest, I know. Psyfiend has been removed from the game, so that is also a huge nerf to the class. Not quite sure how it will adapt or how it will affect it. It's been a while since I've played Shadow Priest in PvP, but it is a pretty significant PvP change. There is Power Infusion, which lost its damage increasing change, so that is no longer in the class. And then the last one here is Shadowy Insight, which now also affects Mind Spike. And there's a lot of I guess abilities that now affect Mind Spike now, and that's due to the final talents. We already talked about the level 90 tier losing their healing capability. So that brings us to the level 100 talents. Now, Void Entropy is a dot. It consumes up to 3 shadow orbs to deal, a certain amount of damage per second. I don't know how I feel about this one, to be honest. I don't like it that much. It's a really long dot that can be dispelled. Just look at it that way. So I can go ahead and use Void Entropy here. You can see what it looks like. It doesn't have the greatest spell visual. It's just like a purple cloud, so to say. Not really impressed. The one on the right here is Auspicious Spirits, which your shadowy apparitions grant you 1 shadow orb instead of dealing damage. I see a lot of people, I've heard a lot of people wanting to take this. No longer we have, your spirits flying at them, flying at your enemy, but they will just keep adding into your shadow orbs. And with your increased shadow orb, bar, I guess you could say, the increased amount of shadow orbs you can hold, this is actually pretty cool. This is a nice thing to have. However, I don't like it as much as Clarity of Power. Your Mind Spike, Mind Seer, and Shadow Word Death deal 40% additional damage to targets not affected by your Shadow Word Pain or Vampiric Touch. It also reduces the cooldown of your Mind Blast by 3 seconds and makes it instant cast. So this is a buff to your mobility, so to say. It allows you to multi-dot targets. Shadow Word Pain and Vampiric Touch are not single one-target only abilities. So it allows you to multi-target, multi-dot targets, and then your main target, you use Mind Spike on the target, and Mind Blast, your instant class Mind Blast. So it kind of, it's a change in playstyles for Shadow Priest. And I kind of like it. It allows you to really kind of push out damage there. Honestly, though, I think the most important of this talent is the fact that the reduction of Mind Blast and instant cast. That, I'm not quite sure how the tuning has been done yet, but that almost gives you Shadow Orbs as fast as Auspicious Spirits, just because of the fact of the reduction of Mind Blast and making it instant cast. So that's a pretty cool talent there. Overall, I really like Shadow Priest's changes. I think the biggest change you're going to notice is actually the fact that everyone else has been brought down to your level in mobility. Just makes things a lot better for the Shadow Priest class. So that's everything with Shadow Priest. The next video that I'll be looking into is going to be Windwalker Monks. And after that, I am not quite sure, but we will look into it. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and this is everything about Shadow Priest. See you guys later. Cheers out.